Hello, welcome back to the blog, welcome back to Mank Buses. I'm Jordan, and this series we're touching on things that either annoy bus drivers or stories of the bus driver. This one I'm going to cover the wonderful annoyance that a lot of service buses for larger companies have, which is cab to cab radio, or cab to base, or cab to shore, whatever terminology you want to call it. But essentially, radio in the cab and a base station at the depot. Now, in Manchester, with the company I work for, which we don't really need to say who it is, but big company, has a beach ball as a symbol and now has Margie's thong as the back of the bus. Oh, excuse me. They have several depots in Manchester and split their frequency up into what is known as talk groups. So every depot has a talk group. Every base station has the ability to operate on all talk groups or broadcast to individual talk groups. The inspectors have their own talk group and again are capable on their handheld versions to broadcast over any of the talk groups and dial any of the buses that are in Manchester. The way the dial system works is, to not get too much into it, all the buses' radio numbers are the fleet number of the vehicle, so they enter the fleet number and then that dials the vehicle. You'll get a unique dial tone when your radio has been dialed, and that conversation between you and the other person is essentially, it is private between you and them. No one else on the frequency can hear it, but others can continue to talk. So, for example, the base can call, say, 19165, be having a conversation with that vehicle, but then the inspectors can also do a all broadcast and all other radios will listen apart from yours, because you are already, your radio is busy in a call. So that's how it works. Now, the system in Manchester worked as the simple, well, I say simple, it's supposed to be simple, but it tended to be a nightmare when it was a bit busy. So unlike other regions where it's open to talk, so you just press your foot pedal and you talk, you can do like 19165 to base, and then you wait for base to respond. In Manchester, it was different. In Manchester, you'd press your talk pedal, the radio would make a noise, and then the call would end. Now what that has actually done is put a call request into base. It will come up on their screen that you've got a call request in, and then you're waiting for them to call you back. This can be very frustrating, as if you're running late or you're trying to got a breakdown, or you're trying to convey a piece of information. If the allocator in the office is busy and then forgets that you've got a call in what was called the stack, and then others are putting calls into the stack, it could be a while before you get answered. When the traffic was a complete nightmare and nothing goes, and then you're trying to radio in to say, I ain't making this back for the break, what would you like me to do? Or, I'm now 72 minutes late, what would you like me to do? Because it was busy, your call could sit in the stack for 20 minutes before it got answered. Because then on top of that, you do also have an additional radio button in the cab. This one is normally situated by your left foot above the normal push to talk button. What that is a emergency radio alarm, and normally they get answered quite quickly. So when that is pressed, no matter what's in the stack, an alarm goes off on the controllers, on the allocator's radio, and they answer that. And so you are sure you pressed it and you're being answered, they'll always answer again. For example, 19165 emergency alarm. The problem with the emergency alarms was drivers used them when they shouldn't. Now, I am personally guilty of that sometimes. I have done it myself. When I knew a certain allocator was in, and when they got busy, they forgot about the radio, and I was going down the motorway. I had red engine management, smoke coming out the back, all sorts on the motorway. So when I pulled up on the hard shoulder, because I couldn't get off the motorway because my power had reduced on the vehicle and I couldn't keep going, and I put in a normal call just before I started pulling over onto the hard shoulder, which was going unanswered, I hit the emergency alarm. I've hit it several times myself when there has been trouble on the bus. I've had a guy for another story who headbutted the assault screen and other bits. But that is not the most annoying part about the radios. In this company, you had no control over the volume of the radio, because it was mounted above your head in a cupboard that you was not accessible to, because it's where the CCTV was also kept, at the top of the stairs. So you'd have some buses where the radio volume was alright, and others where it's dead quiet, and others where it'd burst your eardrums. And again, when it was busy, there is nothing worse than trying to serve passengers with allocators going on the radio, group call, and it would be blaring in your ear. You can't hear the passenger. And you'd be like, just 1 second while he finishes talking rubbish. And then he'd finish. And then if it's sort of like, say, the 142s or the 143s, Hyde Road would put out a call. Well, that gives it away who it is, innit? And then a second later, Sharston with a group call. You know, and they're relaying the same information, but because one depot didn't broadcast at all, they're just relaying the same information. And it was just always murder. And then you've got the inspectors on the radios as well. You could be nowhere near the city centre. You can be in a different flipping... You could be in Stockport, not going near the town centre, or Ashton, and you'll have the Stockport, or you'll have the inspectors on the radio going, no more than 5 minutes in Piccadilly. If you've got more than 5 minutes, take it round the block. And then you'd have like 7 minutes, say, you'd take it round the block, and then you'd have 19165, what's your location? Well, you just told me to go round the block. Well, you're going to be late now. I know. And that's what it was like. But the other annoyance thing about having it is allocators would get used to who did overtime, etc. And what you'd have is allocators, as you're in the middle of a route, 19165. Yeah, Jordan, would you like any overtime? I'm driving. You know. And they'd go through your allocated week with you on the radio whilst you're trying to drive to ask you if you want any overtime. And it was frustrating. It was annoying at times. The other annoying thing about it, and this comes from more of passengers, is when you're using the radio, it is completely legal to use a handheld radio or radio whilst driving. The law permits you to use a handheld radio as long as it doesn't affect your driving. You can still be done with dangerous driving, driving without due care and attention and all that rubbish. The same as what you can be done for adjusting the stereo in your car. But under law, when CB radio came out, it is a clause that you can use a handheld radio that is capable of receiving two-way radio communications, as long as it's not capable of connecting to the internet or sending text messages and that sort of stuff. You can use a two-way radio whilst driving without any problem. Stagecoach, that weren't a problem because we had foot pedals, so we didn't actually have to take our hands off the wheel to talk. And I remember it distinctly. This was probably just before I started driving, and I was on a 201, and I've been accused of this myself, but I can't remember what route I was on when I got accused of it. But I was a passenger this time. A bit of light snow had fallen, and in Britain, if you're listening from outside of Britain, when snow falls in this country, the country shuts down. You know, as soon as that first snowflake drops, we're so ill prepared for snow. But either way, so there's a light dusting of snow on the road, and the driver was talking on the radio. Don't know whether he put a call in, they called him, not too sure. But he's talking. And this woman accused him of using his mobile phone whilst driving. So me being me, I chirped up and went, no, he's using the radio. Said, he's got both hands on the wheel, he's using the radio. Well, he shouldn't be doing that and driving. I went, why not? So it's perfectly legal, he's driving perfectly fine. Yeah, but it's snowing. So what if it's bloody snowing? And I gave up this argument with this woman because it was like, you're not going to win. But the amount of people that accuse you of using a mobile phone whilst driving when you're using the radio to communicate is unbelievable. The other thing that people seem to ask as well, can you find out where the 256 is? Well, I could, but I'm on a 255. And if I put a call in, I'm going to be waiting 20 minutes for them to answer me. By which point now I'm late. So, no. I can't. But go find an inspector. Because the inspectors had a list of vehicles, what was on what. So they knew what vehicles should be coming in to do what services. And because they have the ability to direct dial on their handheld units, you know, it was much easier. So a lot of accusations come from the public when drivers are using the radios, essentially because they don't understand, but they won't ask, they'll just accuse you of it. As I say, the volumes on them were hit and miss. Ones that were dead quiet, you didn't stand a chance of hearing. But you also had a few ones where they were faulty, and there's an allocator, and he came up with a brilliant way of communicating when the radios were faulty. Most radios went faulty in the sense of the microphones went faulty, so you could hear them, but they couldn't hear you. But because every message starts with a preamble tone, what he came up with is if he would ask a yes/no question, and then it'd be like, press your foot button once for yes and twice for no. So you'd leave a gap between pressing the pedal. So you'd press it once, and then you'd press it again, and then that would give two distinct preamble tones to the office. If it was answering yes, you just press it, let go, it would time out. He would then redial the bus if it timed out. So it was an effective way of communicating when the radios were faulty. Obviously, there was nothing they could do when the volume was so low that you couldn't hear what was being said. But yeah, bloody cab radios. Brilliant idea. But in Manchester, the way it worked, it's a nightmare. Hopefully, it'll improve with the new B network, but as all depots aren't joining up to operate as they do in London, as Centracom's, it's just strange. The other good story is as well, we had an allocator that was old enough that he used to operate it when it was known as Metrocom's, and didn't matter what depot he was calling from, who it was for, everything would start with Metrocom's, and that's just the way he was. Radio etiquette was always that, and I'm sure the allocators found it frustrating as well. The radio etiquette was always they announce who they are. So on a group call, they announce who it's for. So all Manchester vehicles, Hyde Road, Sharston, Stockport, Middleton, and it was always Middleton comms, Hyde Road comms, and then they announce, say the message, and then normally they'd always end to say their message is over with, for example, Hyde Road comms standing by, and then that was their message is now finished. But some just didn't bother. When they dial your bus, the radio etiquette states that you're supposed to repeat the first time. You're supposed to repeat your fleet number back to them. This ensures that they know they have dialed and are talking to the correct vehicle. So, for the example, they'd shout up the dial, your radio would make the private call tones, and you'd have off them 19165. You are then supposed to repeat 19165, go ahead. Now, a lot of times it got short into the last three numbers, so I used to say myself 165, go ahead. That's to them saying that they are now talking to the correct vehicle, because a few times they'd misdial. I've done that a few times. And you're now ready to receive their message. But, as I say, we'll wait to see whether there's an improvement. But I hope you found this little bit of a lesson actually interesting, and how the radio systems works. Other companies use analog still, which Middleton used for a while when they took it over, and me being a radio person that was interested in radio at the time, I could scan and listen to it. Not Middleton, Wigan. And I do have on one of my B10 driving videos, I think it's the 197 or 191 route that I did in the B10. That is the depot you can hear talking on the radio. The other thing, obviously, before I end this now, that was annoying was the radio reception. In some places you get reception, in other places you wouldn't. And there is nothing worse than when you need reception, not being able to pick the reception up, and your radio would just beep at you, and you're like, go through. You just keep pressing your button trying to get a call through, till you give up and then use your phone. Well, get out the cab obviously and use your phone. I did have a blog video at one point as well, of where relaying of messages was interesting. We had a Wigan bus at Hyde Road, and this was as there was changing out, so it didn't have the digital radio system that Hyde Road had, so it couldn't be tuned to Hyde Road, and even if it could, the servers that operate the radio system wouldn't accept the vehicle, because that's the other thing, it is digitally encrypted, so it requires a code that's in the radio to handshake with the server, essentially, as they can actually be recorded as well, but it requires that code to handshake with the server and be accepted on. Obviously for the use they're pretty much the same, and because they operate talk groups, it's when they change channel, they're changing talk group. The radio system itself automatically splits down the channels that it's got to enable the most amount of conversations to go on at once. As I say, when it's dead busy, the audio quality can get quite poor as it's carrying on splitting channels, and channels are getting closer together. In some cases, when they did a group call, if you put your foot pedal down quick enough, you could actually talk back to them, even though the system is not set up like that. The only way you could talk from a bus to anyone is if they dialed you. So when it got busy, the system would make a few mistakes. The analog system was simpler. You did get a better signal, but that's just how, I'm not going to get into it, but that's how radio waves work. But yeah, so I was on, as I say, Wigan bus, and I had issues up on Hattersley, surprise, surprise, and I pressed my call button on that vehicle. Now, Wigan wouldn't normally answer it because they know it's out on loan. It's not their vehicle, not their depot. So I pressed the call button a few times because they didn't answer and I needed assistance. I only had the option of pressing the emergency button, hoping that I could get enough signal in Hattersley from the repeater service they use, which, when I actually thought about it, it was only on Werneth Low. But a lot of the sites had been deactivated for analogue radio, but Werneth Low was still active at the time. So as soon as I pressed the emergency button, it was on the screen, emergency alarm, because that once you had a screen, you was either able to cancel the calls in that one, on that system, which was much better. Because on the new system you can't cancel the call, so you know, you could put a call in, it'd be everything done with, and then you don't need them anymore, and the radio up you 20 minutes, half an hour later, and you're like, oh, I can't remember what I wanted you. It's done with now. But yeah, you could cancel the call, so they answered the emergency alarm, they relayed the message back to Hyde Road. But the allocator on at the time wasn't the brightest of sparks at the time, and didn't understand that she couldn't dial the bus I was on because it was on a different radio system. So they spent a good amount of time in the depot trying to dial this bus that they can't talk to. And when I got back in, they were like, it just kept bouncing back. When it will, I said, I'm on analog. So yeah, but anyway, as I say, I hope you've enjoyed this. This has been a bit longer than the other one. I will keep thinking of more to do. Any ideas, do contact us. I'll post it in the description, the comments below on YouTube, as these are going live on YouTube. As always, please support what we do at Manc Buses. You can support us on YouTube membership, by donation, by buying our merch at Teespring, or becoming a member on Patreon. Everything that we get goes towards running Manc Buses and restoring our Dennis Dart Fleet number 114 from Rosendale Transport, or Rosendale Travel, whatever you want to call them. And we hope in the future to be able to help the community and provide free bus services for other community groups with our vehicle, and give back to the community in the same way that you as a community have helped restore and preserve this vehicle. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you out on the road.